inviting him to Houston, but Maharaj, I don't know, Maharaj wrote that his health is not that good to travel. So he said, I love to come and see you, but my health is really weak, so please forgive me. Hare Krishna. So kind. So we will continue reading the commentary by Srila Maharaj that we covered, I think, the Swanishta and Paranishta devotees, and now Upeksanishta devotees we will be, I think. Bhaktivinoda Thakur explained that there are different classes of devotees, and these elements, in fact, all different grades of devotees, unless they are completely purified. From the very neophyte or the lowest devotee to the most advanced devotee, deceit affects and influences everyone. Specifically, Srila Bhakti Vinod Thakur uses names which are not usually used elsewhere. But it's not uncommon for acharyas to coin terminology of their own or to use terminology in their own way. In Rupa Goswami, Ujjvala Nilamani and other books also create some of his own terminology. Similarly, here Bhaktivinoda Thakur talks about three different types of sadhaka, saying that all these three types of sadhaka can become infected by deviciousness and hypocrisy. And we will examine the three different types of devotee. Oh, we read this thing, okay. So we already did this Swanishta and Parinishta. But I think this one they are giving in little bit in detail. Yeah, there is nothing wrong to read more time, so it will become sink in our hearts. So he said the Swanishta become contaminated by deceit when they indulge in sense gratification in the name of satisfying the Lord. Indulging in sense gratification means that for the sake of preaching or performing other activities. I think we read this. So let's go to the Parinishta devotees. That's the third class. Means not third class, they are the top. But these are first is Swanishta, Paranishta, and Upeksanishta. So I think that's where we need to go, the Upeksanishta, not Parinishta. So the third devotee, the renunciate, when deceitful thinks, I'm a sannyasi, I have my danda, I'm a celibate, I must be a very elevated devotee. Because the nature of deceit is, of course, that you deceive others. But the extraordinary nature and very key part of this deceit is that you deceive yourself. Therefore, one begins to be extremely proud of one's position. An example of this deceit being taken to an extreme is that Pondrika. He became convinced that he was the Supreme Personality of Godhead. The whole story is told in Krishna book. Because Pondraka was a king and everything was going well in the kingdom, he had nothing to do and he was bored. His minister thought, quote, how should we make the king happy? Unquote. And they decided, quote, well, Why don't we start glorifying him like he is the supreme personality of Godhead and bowing down to him and behaving with him in that way? Excuse me. Certainly, then he will become very happy. Unquote. Praise everybody like it's right. Soon they came to him and said, "Oh, you are the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Lord Narayana. You have descended into this world." At first, he thought to himself, what is going on? But then he started thinking, quote, well, they are my advisors. They are my ministers. Obviously, they must have known what they are talking about. So yes, they must be right. And come to think of it, I have some divinity within me, unquote. So when we hear too many glorification, we will get convinced that everybody is saying, so I must be like that. That's a snare of Maya. So we have to be extremely careful. I think that the Bhugarbha Goswami, he just stays underneath the hole in the earth, never came out except what Chaitanya Mahaprabhu told him to find out those places where divine couple performed the wonderful pastime. So he did it. But then he went inside not to hear anything. Very difficult in the present age, but we have to avoid our glorification. So in due course of time, he deceived himself to the extent that he challenged even Krishna. Look at this, that you are improper, let's fight. So that was the end of him. So Nirupeksha, going back to the sannyasis, he considered himself a very elevated devotee simply due to the externals of his so-called renunciation, expecting prestige and honor simply for wearing the dress of a renunciate. He sees other devotees as being very inferior, deriding the positions of others. He collects objects and wealth beyond his basic requirement and necessities. In addition, as a result of all his association with wealth and worldly-minded people, as well as committing offenses to other Vaishnava, he ultimately started to associate with women in the name of preaching. Yes, honestly, in order to preach, half the population or more are female. Therefore, I have to also preach to them. He thinks to himself, but he is not simply thinking like that. He is tending to preach more to women because he is attracted to them. His concentration and meditations become fixed on them. Therefore, he becomes overly attached to his dress and positions of renunciate. Ultimately, he becomes very attached to the members of the opposite sex, and in meantime, he neglects his real attachment to Krishna. Ultimately, he falls down. So we will continue reading this wonderful narration. Now we will be dwelling in the life of Srila Prabhupada. This is something that's so nice to dwell in the life of those who has crossed over these nations of material existence. So we can learn practically from the life. So I'll read a couple of lines, 4 or 5 lines to bring up to the speed because our memory is very dull and weak. As we see on the Manaha Siksha, I started reading and then I realized we read it. So our intelligence is so dull. Without performing any fire ceremonies, he simply talked with each in person, asking him to follow the four rules and chant 16 rounds a day. And when the follower promised, Prabhupada initiated him, sitting on the bed while the disciple sat before him on the floor. Prabhupada chanted quietly on the disciple beats and then give him or her his spiritual name. That was the process I think we discussed. That in earlier days there was no elaborate ceremony of initiation was there. It was just the vow to each other from heart to heart. That's all it's needed. But because now we are so fallen, so all this external has to be done, fire sacrifice. Oh, you got initiated, Gurudev, in presence of Gurudev when the deities and the devotees seen it. Why? Because we need those things that, hey, I have taken surrender. Before that, it was surrender from the heart and people living a very nice life. So as the age degrades, we can see it's not that easy to maintain. So hope that we don't have to come back. Otherwise, that time will be even worse than this. So never even think that, oh, these circumstances will become little favorable, then I will become more serious. There is no such a time which is gonna come. Write it down. What I was, I sent today the message to all this. I forgot to send it to 5 o'clock people. That what the message was today was similar like this. Horrible. Let me see what was that. Yeah. One thing is certain, uncertainty of our life. Horrible. So this is a wonderful message. Let me send it to 5 o'clock people because I didn't, somehow or other today, I forgot. I was very punctual actually, that 2:55 or 3:55, 4:55. But today somehow or other Krishna covered up my intelligence. At least they have something to dwell during the day. Okay, so we will continue. One day, one of the new candidates for initiation came in very nervously and bowed down before Prabhupada. The boy didn't get up. So Prabhupada says, you can get up now. So you want to be initiated? The boy said yes and began chanting, not knowing what else to say. Prabhupada said, I will chant on your beats. And after chanting for 10 minutes, he returned the beats to him saying, your name is Aniruddha. This is initiation. What does that mean? The boy asked. Quote, he is the grandson of Krishna. Do you have any questions? Aniruddha couldn't think of anything. He had already forgotten his name. And Prabhupada said he could go. Later, Prabhupada called for Aniruddha. But Aniruddha didn't know that it was his name being called Aniruddha. So Kirtanan said and looked at him, Swamiji is calling you. Another boy who came out received the name Uddhava. The next day, as Prabhupada was sitting in the yard, he called Kirtananda, Upendra, and Uddhava. He wanted to read them a verse he had encountered while studying Srimad Bhagavatam. This is the beauty of this that when they find something, they always share. So Kirtananda and Upendra came and sat at Prabhupada's feet. Oh, where is Uddhava? Prabhupada asked. Upendra told him that Uddhava had gone up to the hills to look at the cows and chant to them. Upendra thought that Swamiji would be pleased to hear that his new disciple had climbed the hill just to chant to the cows. But Prabhupada shook his head unhappily. Restlessness. He had wanted the new boy to hear the verse. That verse is Jayati Jayati Devo Devki Nandano Ashu Jayati Jayati Krishno Rushni Vansa Praditapa Jayati Jayati Mega Shyamalaha Kumalango Jayati Jayati Prithvi Bharanaso Mukundaha. And then Prabhupada give the translation. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is known as the son of Devaki. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the light of the Vishnu dynasty. All glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, whose bodily luster is like that of a new cloud, and whose body is as soft as lotus flowers. You know, when I read this, I remember Loknath Swami Maharaj write in the Brajamandala Parikrama that why Krishna has the threefold bending pose. And at that time when I read, I was really amazed to see that because Krishna, his body is so soft and delicate that when he holds the flute, his body gets three bending positions. Haribol. Only we can imagine how soft that body could be. Okay, all glories to the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who walks on the planet Earth to deliver the world from the scorn of demons and who can offer liberation to everyone. After repeating the Sanskrit and the translation, he told them that they could return to their duties. Haribol. So Prabhupada told Kirtananda he had definitely decided to go to India via New York as soon as possible. Kirtananda packed Swamiji's thing and drove Swamiji's down to San Francisco to spend the night at the temple, and they would leave the next morning. The temple and even Prabhupada's apartment were very hectic that night, with many devotees and guests wanting to see Prabhupada and dozens of people wanting initiation. When Kirtananda advised Prabhupada not to exert himself by going down for the evening program, Prabhupada insisted on at least going and sitting during the kirtan. When he entered the storefront, the devotees immediately stopped their kirtan, dropping down to offer obeisances. There was a hush. He commanded a new reverence. This might be the last time they would see him. They watched him during the kirtan as he played his kartal, singing with them for the last time. The uninitiated wanted to accept him as their spiritual master tonight before it was too late. So Srila Prabhupada asked for the microphone. Nobody had expected him to speak anything. Kirtananda, the only person in a position to restrain him, said nothing and sat before him like the others submissive, and expectant. Prabhupada spoke quietly about his mission. Under the order of his spiritual master, he was bringing Lord Chaitanya's movement to America. And Krishna had kindly sent him so many sincere souls. Quote, I have a few children in India from my family days, unquote, he said. Quote, but you are my real children. Now I'm going to India for a little while, unquote. Everyone fixed his attention on Swamiji as he sat before them, leaning against the Madras covered wall, speaking very softly. Suddenly the door opened and Ravindra Swarup unhappily entered. Everyone knew that Ravindra Swarup wanted to live Krishna consciousness. Haribol. He hadn't taken his initiation vow seriously. He wanted to move on. He didn't want a spiritual master anymore. The other devotees had discouraged him, but he had persisted. They were incredulous. How could he do such a thing on the night before Swamiji's departure? Haribol. Ravindra Swarup fell on the floor to offer obeisances, but he didn't rise up. Instead, he began crawling on his hands and knees over Prabhupada. Ravindra usually had a cavalier manner, enhanced by a handsome face, long tousled hair, and a beard. But now he was wretched and sobbing and crazy. He crawled toward Prabhupada, who sat but 2 steps off the floor on the simple redwood dais. Prabhupada looked at him with compassion. Quote, come here, my boy, unquote. Ravindra crawled up the steps and placed his bushy head on Prabhupada's lap. Moved, the devotees watched as Prabhupada stroked Ravindra's head, and the boy cried and cried. What's wrong, my son? You don't have to be so unhappy. Ravindra bawled out, quote, I want. And then he didn't say anything. He sobbed, to reach God directly without anyone in between, unquote. Prabhupada continued to paw and stroke the boy's head. Quote, no, you continue to stay with us if possible. Don't be a crazy fellow, unquote. Ravindra's weeping subsided and Prabhupada continued, speaking both to Ravindra and to the emotion-struck group in the room. Quote, I am an old man, he said. I may die at any moment, but please, you all carry on this Sankirtan movement. You have to become humble and tolerant. As Lord Chaitanya says, be as humble as a blade of grass and more tolerant than a tree. You must have enthusiasm and patience to push on this Krishna conscious philosophy. What a wonderful message, huh? Essence of everything is Trunidapi Sunichenataro Vivasahisnuna. Amadena Manadena Kirtaniya Sadhari. If you want to chant the holy name continuously, this is the prerequisite for all of us. And if we cannot practice perfectly, we won't be able to chant constantly the holy name of Krishna, which has the power and potency to deliver us from the cycle of birth and death. So suddenly Ravindra's tears were gone. He jumped up, dejectedly stood, hesitating for a moment, and then hurried out the door, banging it behind him. Rabindra Swarup dramatic exit from Krishna consciousness shocked the devotees. Prabhupada sat still and continued speaking to them gravely, asking them to stick together and push on the movement for their own benefit and for the others. Whatever they have learned, he said, they should repeat. They realized, perhaps for the first time, that they were part of a preaching mission, a movement. They were together not just for good times and good vibration. They had a loving obligation to Swamiji and to Krishna. Prabhupada returned to his apartment, which soon became chaotic. It was late. Many people wanted initiation. Mukunda, Jayananda, and other temple leaders tried to determine which candidates were sincere. Then they selected those candidates, half a dozen at a time, and allowed them into Prabhupada's room. Prabhupada sat behind his little desk, chanted on each person's beats, and returned them, giving each person a spiritual name. Kirtananda requested him to stop. Further initiation could be done through the mail. But Prabhupada said he would continue initiating whoever was present. Mukunda and Jayananda set priorities. Some person had been waiting months to be initiated and were obviously sincere. Others would have to be turned away. So John Carter is narrating this scene in his own word as follows. At the end of the lecture, I was sure that I wanted to be initiated. And even though there was some talk of being initiated by mail, I knew I wanted to have that personal connections with my spiritual master, and he personally initiated by him, personally accepted. I ran up to Mukunda and said, "Good, how many are on the list? I would like to get on the list." He said, "Well, Swamiji isn't really taking them in any particular order. We are just going to try to pick out the most sincere people." Unquote. Quote, "Please put my name on that list," I said. "I'm really sincere. I really want to get initiated." Unquote. So he put me down and took the list up to Swamiji. And Swamiji began calling for the people one by one. After the third person, when my name wasn't called, I became a little worried. Then after the fourth person, I was really sitting on edge. Then when they called the fifth person, and it wasn't me, I was totally destroyed. I felt, quote, "Oh, he's going to India, and then he's going back to Krishna. I just lost my chance. This is it. There is no use in me living anymore." Unquote. I was trying to make it to the coat rack and get my coat and get out before anybody could see me go crying. I hadn't started crying yet, but I could tell it was coming. A couple of people patted me on the back and said, "Good, it's all right. He can write you a letter and tell you your name," unquote. All I could think was, yeah, the way he was walking tonight, it may never happen, unquote. I could barely stand up. I went outside and started walking across the parking lot toward Golden Gate Park. I was kind of heading toward the Golden Gate Bridge. I thought, quote, I will just jump off, unquote. I hadn't been there long enough to understand that if you commit suicide, you have to become a ghost. I just figured my life was useless. I got about halfway across the parking lot when the idea struck me. Quote, what if he decided to take one more and I was out here somewhere? Unquote. The thought filled me with so much hope that I turned around and ran back to the temple. And just as I walked in the front of the temple, Janki ran down and said, "Oh, he will take one more." And he grabbed somebody else and ran up the stairs. I felt my knees start to collapse, and tears came putting out of my eyes. Harsanani was standing there, and she grabbed me by the arm and said, "Good, come with me." She raced up the stair, pulling me to the top, the burst into Swamiji's room without even knocking. Swamiji looked up with amazement. She said, "Good, Swamiji, you have to initiate this boy," unquote. I was just bowling and Swamiji began to laugh. He said, "Good, it's all right. Don't cry. Everything will be all right," unquote. He chanted on my beats and gave me the name Jivananda Prabhu. Jivananda Prabhu ki jai ho. He was so dedicated as he was so desperate to jump off from the Golden Gate Bridge. But he lived a very exemplary life. So instructive life for all of us. Being an educated from the Ohio State University, and he was driving a cab, and every penny he donated to the temple. He was alone maintaining the temple. And then what to speak of his hard work that he exhibited throughout his life. Wonderful examples. So time has reached to depart. Devotee may have other duties to perform. So before they leave, we would like to offer our humble obeisances at the task of the lotus feet by saying, Vancha kalpatarubhasya kripa sindhu bhaivacha patitanam pavnebhyo vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Thank you very much. And if Krishna so desire, we'll see you tomorrow morning before 2 o'clock. I think now 4 or 5 devotees, I don't know, I'm joining before 1:50, 1:47.